Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Today we're going to talk about one of the biggest questions people ask when they're dreaming about starting their own little hobby farm. How much land do you actually need? And this is a really hard question to answer because the answer seems like it should be, well, as much as possible, as much as you can afford. But the real answer is, it depends, right? It depends. So, you have to start thinking about what your goals are. When we first started out, we thought we needed a ton of land. We are like, there's no way we're ever going to have enough land to do all the things we want. But the things we wanted, it turned out didn't take as much land as we thought. Originally, we thought we would need acres and acres, miles of fencing, the whole 9 yards. That's what we thought. That's what we felt like we needed. But over time, we learned that it's less about how much land you have and more about how you use it. So we have just the small acreage here, the front acreage, and then there's the field. Okay. We're only utilizing this acreage. And it's small, yes. Like we're under 10 acres in this front section that we have. We're under 10. And that's fine for us because it turns out what we want to do, we don't need to utilize more land than that. Okay. We've managed to raise goats and ducks and chickens and rabbits, turkeys, quail, barn cats, Great Pyrenees, and even our miniature horse without having to take over half the province. So you don't need as much land as you think unless your goals are huge. Thank you, Saruman. Unless you're hoping to have 100 head of cattle, in which case you're not a hobby farmer anymore. But if you're just running a small hobby farm, you don't need as much as you think. So let's break it down a little bit because it gets dicey if you don't nail down what you're after. Okay? So let's talk about goats and mini horses. We have Shadowfax behind us, and I don't know if you can see her, but Arwen is right there. She's there. Okay, she's laying behind the buckets. It's on the other side of those buckets. There goes a chicken. So let's talk about goats and mini horses. They need space to move, but they don't necessarily need rolling pastures. They're fine in this front acreage, and as everyone has seen in most of our videos, they roam wherever they darn well feel like roaming. So Shadowfax is sometimes down at the other end of the property and stuff like that. They have acres to roam. They don't need a ton of other space. So the dry lot, which is necessary if you have mini horses, you do need a dry lot. And then what we call the pasture, which is really just the rest of the acreage, is more than enough for Shadowfax. And goats are not that hard. Goats don't need as much space as you think they need. Can they get up to a good running speed? Is there enough room for everyone to graze at once? Then you're fine. What about ducks and chickens? Honestly, ducks and chickens really don't require much space at all. The chickens are laying here in the shade beside me. So's the turkey, actually. You could do ducks in a small fenced yard with a kiddie pool. They'd be happy with that. Same with chickens. They don't need the kiddie pool, though. So you don't need a ton of space for them. Quail and rabbits, well, honestly, quail and rabbits really don't need that much space, despite the fact that, yes, even right now, we have 2 rabbits who have escaped who are kind of wandering around over there. I don't care. I'll pick them up later. This doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We'll pick them up later. But they really don't need as much space as you think. Okay, a small backyard setup, if you plan it right, you can do quail and rabbits. It's more about smart design. It's multi-use spaces and making your land work for your goals. So do you need 5 acres or do you need 25 acres? Well, that kind of depends, really. It depends on your goals. Of course, nobody tells you when you're starting out that your most valuable resource isn't land, okay? You think it is. You think, okay, if I get the land, I'll be good. Your most valuable resource is actually fencing. Fencing, patience, and duct tape. Uh, for some reason, duct tape, I know everyone jokes about you use it all the time, but you actually use it all the time. A good roll of duct tape will do a lot of things. So if you have really good fencing, you have some patience, and you have some duct tape, you can turn most areas into a small hobby farm as long as you are aware of the space each individual animal is going to require, because not all animals require the same amount of space. Okay? So think about the space you have before you move. Before you move and go grab a huge amount of land, think about the land you have. If you have, let's say you have 5 acres, what are your goals? Because if all you want are chickens and some rabbits and maybe a handful of ducks, you can do that on 5 acres. That's easy. You could do a mini horse on 5 acres. That's not a problem at all. Think about the space you have. So if you're wondering if you can start a hobby farm on 2 acres or even in your backyard, the answer is yeah, you can, depending on what you're after, what your goals are, what animals you want to incorporate, how much of a garden do you want. You may not have cows and hay fields on your couple of acres, but you can have chickens, your gardens, your rabbits, or even a goat or two. Start small, build slowly, which is always what you should do anyway. Don't add more than you can take on right away. Don't do it all at once. We didn't. But go slow, add one thing at a time, and you might find that the land you have, hey, maybe you don't have to move. I get that a lot. I get that, well, I need to move to a bigger space before I do a hobby farm. Now, obviously, if you're living in the city or the suburbs, you're going to have to, because you can't do that. You can't have a hobby farm in the city. But if you already have property in the country and you just think it's too small, maybe give it a shot anyway. If you only have 5 or 10 acres, you can make that work. Okay? Easy. The truth is, there's no perfect number of acres for a hobby farm. It depends on the animals and your goals and how much chaos you're willing to wrangle in any given day. Whether it's just a few raised beds and some hens or a full-on menagerie like we've got, you can make it work. So before you rush out and say, well, I guess I got to spend $500,000 on this acreage, think about the space you have, the animals you want, and whether or not you can make it work. Because the animals we have don't take up that much space. Even Shadowfax, okay? He's our largest animal who requires the most space. He does not require as much space as you think. Okay, he does not need 10 acres. It's not a requirement for a mini horse. He would be fine technically in the small pen that he's got. That technically is big enough. Now he's obviously not in there all the time, because there's no reason to have him in there all the time. Right? There's no reason. He runs around all the time. We have so many videos of him running around because he's awesome and loves to run around. But he could be fine in that pen. That is big enough for one mini horse. So before you sell your property and invest $500,000 or more into a larger space, think about the space you've got and can you make it work? Because this is our space for our mini horse. Our rabbits are in oversized dog kennels. We're going to build something bigger, yes. But they're fine in their oversized dog kennels. They're literally fine in their oversized dog kennels. Okay, they're fine. So in theory, we don't have to expand what we've got. Our birds free range all over the property, do their bird thing, and they're fine. We have under 10 acres that we utilize, that this front piece is under 10 acres. You don't need a ton. Now, obviously, if you want a herd of cattle and you want your own hay fields, go for it. But you don't need it. Okay? You do not require that in order to have a wonderful, fulfilling setup that works for you. So before you move, before you invest a bunch of money, sit down and think, what animals do I want? How much space do they require? What kind of setup would make me happy? Because you might not be happy with the minimum amount of space required. I wouldn't be happy if that was Shadowfax's all the time, 100%, never allowed out pen. I wouldn't be happy with that, but he would be fine, but I wouldn't be happy with that. So think about what's required, what will make you happy, and whether or not you're ever going to want something more than what you're already planning for. Like, thank you guys. I am never going to have a full-sized horse. It's not that I don't like them. It's just that my sister has full-size horses. If I want to go hang out with full-size horses, I'll just go to her house. I don't need full-size horses. I'm considering a miniature cow. They're about, 600-700 pounds instead of 1,400 pounds. But I'm never going to have a large full-size cow. I'm never going to have the biggest birds I'm going to have are turkeys and peacocks. I am not going to have emus. Maybe one day I'll get an alpaca because I kind of like them. That's maybe on my list, but all of that can fit on our acreage. We do not require more. So when we moved to this location, we had a discussion. Will this work long term for our hobby farm? And the answer is yes. Of course it will. We do not require 100 acres to do the things we want to do. And frankly, owning more land means you have more land to manage. So don't bite off more than you can chew. See if what you want to do can be done in the area you've got, because maybe it can. Maybe you don't have to move. Okay? More is not always better. So give it some real thought. Sit down with a piece of graph paper and draw things out. Anyway, that is about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. What does your dream setup look like? Are you already farming on a small scale, or are you planning for something bigger? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you're working towards. We'll see you tomorrow.